So I'll take it that you remember we do not have a lot to do, and I know we had ample time to do it. And if anything, I tend to go. I try to get through this stuff a little more quickly than I do the other stuff because I think it's more important. And you recall this was the last area. And the biggest thing I can tell you about that is, at least from a historical standpoint, these were important, pardon me, but the problem again, this dovetails into vaccines. And going forward, you should be familiar if you're administering the vaccine to know what preservatives they're using. That one I told you about, without writing it down again, thimerosal, I think it's thimerosal, I don't know for sure, is again the compound that was part of this unfortunately faulty research, but people honed in on it. And in the medical profession, there's a lot of that. You get doctors who say, "Hey, there's never anything shown that there's a link with autism," and again, to counter that, well, there's never anything shown that it is not. I mean, you can either seek to prove or disprove something in life. And I said, and theoretically, you need to do both to have an accurate study. And it's not a knock on vaccines. My kids had all their vaccines and things like that. But clearly, there are, whether it is diagnostic, whether it is environmental, whether it is vaccines, or if they play a contributing role, there clearly has been an uptick in the number of people who have been diagnosed somewhere with some degree of what they would call autism, or as they say colloquially, on the spectrum. Okay. And, and depending on where you fall on sort of the spectrum of that, whether it's one of your kids or it's never happened in your family, you might have your own versions of opinion. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, okay, but I just want to inform you. That's why my job is to bring things to your attention that you can, and so you can inform yourself and make a decision when it becomes relevant to you, or in the future if you have kids. Why, I don't know. So I've said this before. Trouble is, you can't have grandchildren without it. It's hard. Nevertheless, ozone. Ozone is something we don't really get involved with so much. It's used more than you think. It's, again, we see it in the wastewater industry, and it's very, very interesting to see water treatment, because we really don't give water treatment a second thought until we get a notice from on radio or on TV, or some alert that says, "Hey, don't drink the water, blah, 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 blah. There was a problem, and boil it," and then all of a sudden everything's better again. But the reality is that there's a lot goes in. It's a very, very important industry. My brother-in-law, wrong term, my sister-in-law's husband, that's because your brother-in-law isn't that relationship, was here in Moon for 40 years after he got out of the Navy in their water treatment facility. So he did, retired from Moon Township. They live here in Moon. Okay. A very important category. The name is not hydrogen peroxide. They are collectively called peroxygens. And you can sterilize with them, and you can just gently cleanse wounds, even use them for wound healing. So there's a whole level, and it's all based on concentration and temperature. And so they have different things, and they're not harmless, because they wouldn't be a sterilant if they were harmless. And this is the great part about them. They are readily biodegradable. With a lot of, imagine you're going to work out in the gym of your choice, wherever you're a member. It's interesting to look at what they have to use very, very specific agents to wipe down the machines. Okay? You almost have to use relatively low toxicity, biodegradable things, because if it has fumes, when you're huffing and puffing after a workout, and particularly a lot of the gyms cater to, they have silver sneakers programs to older individuals to try to, to improve their fitness levels, and insurance companies pay for that, if you did not know. So they make it easy to have memberships. They have to have biodegradable things. The first one I went to utilized hydrogen peroxide with orange oil, which is in a lot of cleaning because they're all both biodegradable and they're very, very effective. So it has relatively appealing scent, and you didn't get that sort of that funny sort of medicinal smell that was there. So that's where hydrogen peroxide has that. The other ones, as we'll get to, are those quats or quaternary ammonium salts. So it is not nearly as toxic as things like that, these relatively harsh chemicals. So we can use them because they evaporate. That's where the consumables comes in. That's where the juice boxes and drink boxes, little peel apart things to put in your coffee. You go over, and they used to have it sheets all the time. Now they have the dispenser, but they have little baskets of those things that are there. We have them here at school when we have faculty meetings and things like that. Depends on the surface. This is the whole idea of what you do in lab called the bubble test or the catalase test, because our cells, when they're damaged, release the catalase and it degrades the hydrogen peroxide, which is why it's so effective. A lot of oxygen goes out there and it basically clobbers microbes that are there. The trouble is that it's a rather intense thing and it can sting, particularly full strength. Is it more effective on inanimate objects? Yes, it is. Okay. And again, doesn't damage a lot of materials. This is what they use, vapor phase. So it's super concentrated and superheated to about 140 degrees. So that's really, really quite hot. This one is more potent. I'm not as familiar with it. Okay. But as you can see, they work again with the presence of organic compounds. So it's something that may be used in systems. And as we get more information about it, you folks will find out if that becomes something that we consistently begin to use. Historically, the most famous of them is phenolic compounds because that's what Lister did. And phenol is an organic chemical. If you ever had organic chemistry, it's one you learn about right away. And we're called aromatics. And it's not carboic acid, it's carbolic. There's an L in there, but it's a PowerPoint. So unpleasant odor and irritating the skin. I used to use it to cauterize. If I removed a wart from somebody, to remove a wart and you don't want it to grow back, you have to cauterize the surface to kill all the viruses. You can't kill viruses, but to remove all the viruses. And I would use full strength phenol. Obviously, the area had to be locally anesthetized. And it hurt quite a bit afterwards, but it was very, very effective. So we use phenol a lot in procedures, full strength phenol. What Lister did was, it was a cleaning solution. Well, used a lot in the old days when they somehow found a way of making this, and they'd wipe down the walls with it and things like it was horrible smelling. And they used that back in Tudor era England. That's part of the things that they wiped down the walls so that the king's kid wouldn't get sick. That whole thing with that. Nevertheless, not reliable on naked viruses per se. You had denature proteins and all of that, but and fairly cost effective. As you began to dilute it, interestingly, we could use it in emergencies as a local anesthetic. As you diluted it more, it became effective topically. That's what Lister worked with. He began to dilute these and use them on the skin and use them on instruments. And they've always worked well with organic matter. If they weren't clean, those instruments, and they had doctors washing their hands in solutions of that even though it might have been unpleasant or bad for the skin, but they weren't wearing all those wonderful gloves. They were just cutting with their hands. So reasonable cost and presence with detergents and organics. There's a residue, which is beneficial in this particular case. So these were the products. They were used extensively. And now they have both been restricted. Hexachlorophene was originally in topical creams. So before there was triple antibiotic, people were using hexachlorophene-based creams. They found it was a neurotoxin. Look off the market. Triclosan, I told you before, every antibacterial soap had triclosan till about 8 years ago. Now they all have something totally different. because they start to see accumulation in organs. It's the way it works. When something looks good, it doesn't. So Listerine, all that stuff. Here's what we use a lot of today, and this is the one now in the antibacterial soap, quats, quaternary ammonium salt. Effectively, it's a positively charged chemical that inherently is bipolar. And the beauty of bipolar is it's soluble in water. Part of it will attach to fat-soluble things like dirt, grease, and grime. That's what soaps do. It's more environmentally friendly and less toxic than the detergents you would use in the washing machine. Those are negatively charged. These are positively charged. So they're not interchangeable. Does that mean you couldn't use laundry soap? You ran out of soap and you went down, you had to pump all and you wanted to put it on. Probably work just as well. But it's not nearly as desirable, particularly if it was consumed or anything like that, on surfaces. So in a restaurant, in between tables, if they have bare table, they're wiping it down and spraying it down with that. They do what's called turning a table, meaning getting ready for the next group of people who are having dinner. All those types of things. And the more of those you turn, the more money you make from that in the food industry. That's the way that stuff works. So we use them all the time. Again, Lysol wipes and Clorox wipes, they have this stuff in. So positive charge attracts negative charge cell surfaces, destroys vegetative bacteria, develop just the same kind of things like alcohol does. Lots of personal care products. And just like iodine, Pseudomonas is resistant. Pseudomonas you can start to see now. As you start to work with it in the lab, yet it's a pest. But it's everywhere. So it's a pest we have to get used to. And that's kind of the laundry list of those. We're almost done. If you, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. So again, when we use them as preservatives, that's the idea, just like in vaccines or in foods you consume. So food preservatives, non-toxic and safe for ingestion. So when you say, say potassium sorbitate or something like that, if you sit there, good idea. Okay, potassium benzoate and calcium disodium EDTA. Those are the preservatives, and it's a chemical feast. Okay? It's what all this stuff is. And my wife would be mad at me for using this sugar substitute because it's harmful. Okay, the aspartame, not good for you. For you, all you diet beverage fans, there are safer ones to use. Nothing's perfect, but benzoate, sorbitate, propionate, all of those are in that category of preservatives. So these are relatively safe, comparatively speaking. They're not all that way. For years, we used nitrates and nitrites, okay, particularly for botulism. And this is another name for this potassium nitrate is called pinking salt. Okay, so if you see a cooking show and they're making corned beef, they're going to put some pinking salt in that, or they're making pastrami because it retains a certain color that they find desirable. Not necessarily, I used to put a ton of it in hot dogs, ton of it, and they were difficult to consume. Carcinogenic when converted to nitrosamines by cooking or intestinal bacteria. These are all little things you got to look for. And typically, it's not a big deal unless you're consuming them in excess. And again, refrigeration, the difference is they still can grow. It just slows them down. And then the big problem, again, with freezing is handling, because it's easy to create ice crystals. That's the idea of freeze drying is much more effective. That's what lyophilization is. So by getting the water out, and again, the handling, putting them into a freezer individually rather than shove it like we all do. Oh yeah, we'll just freeze that stuff, shove it in a bag, and the next thing you know, it's not the same when you defrost. And again, don't be like me, label and date the stuff. That's why I have that little thing there you can write on. And all those zip top bags. It's there for a reason. Okay. And this is the whole idea of salting and sugaring or drying. All of that, okay, other than adding flavors potentially with regard to that, it dehydrates them. Staph grows in salt, so staph can be a problem. Okay. And again, freeze drying a little bit different. Okay. Again, dried eggs, no C is necessary there, is again a problem. So you have to look for stuff. People get worried about things like, okay, if you're worried, oh, I wouldn't eat anything with a raw egg in it, or a coddle, a partially cooked egg that you use in certain kinds of sauces. Uh, it's the problem is the shell, not what's inside. What's inside the egg is sterile. Okay, it's non-infectious sterile is probably the wrong term. But the exterior of the egg is proper. So you can buy very expensively pasteurized eggs. So if you have people could, oh my God, there's a raw egg in there, I'll die. I made keto brownies last night, and I don't know about you. When I bake, I'm a taster before it cooks. So much cookie dough, so little time.
Exactly.
You know?
That's the best part.
It's the best part.
That's why you make
Lick
it.
the spoon, baby. So I was
YOLO.
making keto, which is almond flour and coconut flour, and I use allulose and cocoa along
Sounds
with
expensive.
it is expensive, but it's goodies. All right, now back to the ranch. One more thing to go. I know people are looking at me strangely today, but why? Understand how why is that? Why is today any different than any other day?
Which slideshow?
This is the Cowan PowerPoint on the same topic. I'm hoping that they have the chart. Not that chart. Not that chart. Yeah, Cowan used to before they changed this is said chart. Okay, so be a label reader. I love the chart. Lysol and Clorox wipes. Oh, they're Clorox wipes. They're really good. No, they're not. Lysol. Oh, they're really good. They're benzyl ammonium chloride. That's one of those quads. They're mild. I keep telling you, that's why they have them as you walk into the produce area. You don't want to have Clorox on something and pick up an apple and decide to munch on it. Okay? And do me a favor, anything you get, wash it when you get home. Please. That bag of pre-washed lettuce, that's so easy. As college students 101. Oh, we'll get lettuce. Pre-washed lettuce. We don't have to wash it. Did you see them wash it? I didn't. Thank you. No, that's our mutual best buddy, whose wife tragically lost about a 10-year battle with breast cancer a couple of years ago. And it's like, we hang out with him. Now, on the other hand, Clorox type products, mildew removers, disinfecting spray, again, benzyl ammonium, okay, more in the quads category. Chlorhexidine in contact lens solutions. Were you aware? It happened a long time ago. Why am I aware of it? Because my sister worked for the company at a very high level, an executive level. Bausch & Lomb, it was the leading producer of precision ophthalmological products, particularly contact lens solution. They're Boston something. This is more than 10 years ago. I would dare say 2000, maybe 15 years ago by this time, had a problem where fungus grew. They had never had a contamination problem. They have one place that makes it, a facility in North Carolina, that a fungal agent grew and 5 people lost eyes. Ooh is right. That's a major league ooh. So it caused blindness, either total or partial, in at least 5 individuals from this fungal infection, a product that was the #1 seller in the United States. So my sister had nothing to do with production, she's a marketer, but she was on a team of people trying to deal with all the repercussions of this to figure out a strategy. They took care of it as best as they could. They tried to deal with it. They knew there were going to be lawsuits. They tried to take care of any people who were affected and interact positively because it had a trusted brand for forever. Okay. But so she was on a team to do that. I mean, the company took major losses. When a big company has health problems, you might see it now. If you go to Chipotle, Okay, they are in big trouble. They went from the number one Tex-Mex style fast food place way down the list because they were very inattentive to contamination and health problems. E. coli, another virus you're going to hear about. We're going to talk about when we get there. Big problems dealing with that. They had norovirus. These are because, and there's only one way that that stuff happens. They're handling stuff improperly and they didn't react well. So there's nothing easy. Okay, here, ethanol, some may have a little bit of detergent in them. Here, another eye drop that actually has a chloride, but a very, very low level of it. So this is recent study followed surgical intensive, 24 of them registered nurses, 6 respiratory forward nurse. Okay, 41% use alcohol, was more than 20 times 50% on gloves. So soon there were studies to show how healthcare organizations changed their hand hygiene practices during how that impacted the skin microbiome. Okay, so they did testing with all of that type of stuff that's there, and that really concludes it. So that's, I think there's a little bit of impact if you go back and try to find that study, how COVID was beneficial in that unusual way. Certainly not beneficial for people dying, but our attitude and our arrangement, and I know it's getting blowback now because they're changing COVID. The CDC is doing away with the first day away a 10-day mandatory if you're test positive, can't have contact to 5 days. Now they're taking. But the reality is, COVID, in order to continue to exist, even though COVID's not living, but what viruses do is very similar to what any population does. It changes over time to persist. It becomes less intense. So it will constantly mutate, and every so often we're going to get a nasty one. And then all of a sudden everybody's going to go bananas. Don't get ready to leave yet. I got 10 more minutes to introduce genetics. Sorry. See, I saw that. I saw that backpack come out. I'm sorry. I don't mean to pick on you today. Usually I pick on somebody else. I don't like to pick on the nice people. Yeah, Grace is very nice.
Aw, that's the best thing you said.
Ever.
I know.
Ever.
You even called me out when I wasn't even here.
Of course. But I was joking because you had emailed me.
We were
I mean,
on the bus and I was like, Grace, I mentioned you again. She's like, really?
Yeah, she hits me and she's like sidebarred up the other one. Of course.
I'm sure that wasn't all you had to say. Okay, last on the list of this next chapter, we actually go back a chapter in Cowan, and I just want to give one thing that I've said it like 6 times already. The word mutation. Even today, I said it a couple of times, and the reality is, hiding. Reality is that viruses and bacteria mutate all the time. They are different than we are. We have eukaryotic cells. We have pairs of chromosomes. Viruses do not. So if you look at bacteria versus eukaryote, our cells, us, why don't bacteria mutate and viruses mutate constantly, yet we look at us, we don't see a lot of mutation realistically. Why are the reasons for that? First, the DNA. We have pairs of chromosomes. Where bacteria have a single circular chromosome. Okay. The way we talk about bacterial mutations, here we have pairs of chromosomes. You all know basic genetics. What can they be? Not a whole lot. You have dominant, dominant recessive, recessive dominant, and double recessive, right? Yeah. Then go 101. So here you don't even talk about dominant and recessive. We talk about wild type normal E. coli, normal staph, and anything that isn't, okay, is called a mutation. That's because there's no other pair. If a mutation occurs here, what you're going to see is that viruses have a very limited, bacteria have a very limited ability to deal with it. They have something called mismatch repair, which means all they can do is either chop out the mutation or chop out the normal piece of DNA. I'll show it all. So it's a 50-50 proposition. The DNA is the same. It's double-stranded DNA. They're most likely to remove the mutation as they are to remove the good side of the DNA. Remember, there's two strands that are joining one another. Here, you have all sorts of, if it happens, if it's dominant and dominant, remember, only one of those is expressed, the one you get from mom or the one you get from dad. Okay? And if that's the case, if you're going to have one of those, if the mutation is here, at least you have a 50-50 possibility on a relatively rare thing called homozygous dominant. And the same applies for homozygous recessive. Those aren't that common. The most common ones are what we call heterozygous. Dominant and recessive, 3 to 1 times more likely. And again, because we tend to, people made with dominant people are much more likely to make with dominant people, and the number is about 82 in real life, up to about 85 to 15. And so if it happens on the recessive and you have a dominant and recessive, guess what? It doesn't get expressed. Tree, forest, nobody hears it. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So the very arrangement, there's something you probably didn't learn about in AP1, maybe you did, it's called messenger RNA process. Ringing a bell? Introns and exons on a gas station. Okay. Fun. Thank you.
Oh, you know.
So you have DNA is a strand, and the DNA makes messenger RNA. If you're in a bacteria, the messenger RNA makes protein. So if there's a mutation here, it's here, and it's in the protein. In carrier cells, DNA, we have things in the DNA that make proteins and things that are just regulatory. So the messenger RNA contains little things called introns and exons, and they alternate segments. And what happens in our cells, if it's processed, and it is, they remove the introns and just take the exon segments and splice them together. So if the defect was on the intron, which is called an insertion sequence, okay, it doesn't matter. Because that defect is not going to have any impact on making the protein. Okay? And the last thing is, I mentioned before, they have what's called mismatch repair. Okay, and we have a wonderful product that eukaryotic cell has called DNA polymerase. So here's the deal. So what's a mutation? Remember, it's A's and T's, G's and C's, A's and T's, G's and C's. So in mismatch repair, if all of a sudden it goes A and T, and then all of a sudden there's G and G, shouldn't be matched together, mismatch repair is likely to yank out mutation versus the normal. So you're fine. You're fine. I called you a mutation.
Doctor stop.
It's very refer back. Where in a eukaryotic cell with DNA polymerase 3, A and a T, great, G and a G, it not like it will always remove the mutation and preserve the appropriate. Not always, but too much. That's the whole idea of DNA polymerase. It's almost an educated way of preparing. And those mechanisms alone probably reduce the rate of mutation spontaneously. Meaning, mutation is the price of doing business. You're making million bacteria, you're going to get a few mutations. So in our cells, the mutation rate is probably 1 in a billion, maybe 1 in a trillion. Bacteria is probably 1 in 10,000 to maybe 1 in a million. So you're looking at a gigantic factor. And if you would, at least a factor of maybe 1 in 1,000 is typically what we say. So bacteria are 1,000 to maybe up to 100,000 times more likely to form a mutation just regularly because it doesn't have those safeguards. And that's why this whole genetics unit is so terribly important. Because you have to understand, it doesn't matter. We can be treating them right, we can be dealing with them right, but if we don't respect the fact that they can mutate, and nothing proved that more than things like COVID did, and how much they changed the way we sort of view infections. Thank you. All right, more on how we're going to deal with this exam. It'll give me something to ponder this evening when it's me and the dog.
And you're gonna
And
send
the
out the
2 kitties.
syllabus.
And I will send everybody, I will resend the syllabus. Did you see the syllabus?
When we click the
No,
link,
it's
doesn't
not.
open.
It's not in the Blackboard. Like it says syllabus, but you can't click
Oh,
it.
there's, I will resend. I'll resend.
Thank you.
Not a problem, not a problem.
Have a great weekend.
Tell me these things.